Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are watching Off the Track, and it is time to drop the hammer.
Crazy.
You talked a little bit about early getting started. Can you give us some background on your dad and how much a part of you getting started in racing that was being here in Red Bluff and how he was a part of racing?
Sure. My dad was raised on a farm in Susanville, California, and just was always interested in cars, and that was totally different from what, his family did with ranching and stuff like that. But he got involved in cars and built drag racing cars and, built engines and stuff like that. And then ended up moving to Anderson and worked at the sawmill and was doing porting cylinder heads on the side. And, that kind of progressed along. And he actually ended up being an engine builder for Bill Schmidt, which was like was probably the biggest West Coast team there was. And then got recognized by when the East Coast cars and the West Coast cars raced together at like Phoenix and Ontario and Riverside. They were East-West races. He got kind of recognized by some of his engines being standouts, and that led him to working for Benny Parsons in, I think, the late 70s, early 80s, like 79, 80-ish. And, man, that was like, if you had a $200,000 budget in NASCAR, man, you were big time. I mean, they didn't even have haulers yet. They still had like a box truck and a flat trailer and like 4 or 5 cars. And, that led to, him going to work for Petty Enterprises and being part of that. And he was actually part of the controversial 198th win with the big engine. That was his.
Oh, really?
At Charlotte, yeah. And then he kind of took a break from all that because the teams weren't funded well enough and the job market wasn't, the teams that go out of business a lot.
Yeah.
And there wasn't, but like, maybe Junior Johnson's team or Richard Childress's team or Richard Petty's team. Those were the only ones that really had solid funding, and that wasn't great. It was good, but it wasn't great.
Yeah.
So, we kind of moved around a lot, and the teams weren't centrally located in Mooresville like they are now. So we were in Georgia for a while, and then we were in Winston-Salem, North Carolina for a while, and then we were in Charlotte for a little while. And I went to a bunch of different schools, and then finally he just decided that he was going to get out of it, and we were going to come back to California, and he was going to take a job, doing some drafting and some engineering work at this company in Anderson that built some automated furniture equipment, and we were going to go racing. And my sister and I could go to the same schools. Well, we did that, and that's how the Red Bluff thing started in the 80s, and we raced along in that.
How old were you at that time?
13.
13, gotcha. So you were traveling around a lot when you were younger, a lot younger. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's so crazy because, like, the racing, I mean, you literally drove in a van. If you got to go to the races with your dad, you were in the van with the team, and you drove all night home from Michigan and pulled in the parking lot, and my mom would come and get me, and I'd go home and go to sleep, and my dad would go to work, because there wasn't but a handful of people. There wasn't airplanes and all this fancy travel stuff like they have nowadays. But yeah, so then we got racing, and then he was doing some engines. And this is actually kind of a cool story, and I didn't really realize the significance of this until after I became a Cup Crew chief myself. Mm-hmm. But somewhere along the lines here, so I kind of got a little messed up on the timeline. So before he went to work for Richard Petty, how he got the job working for Richard Petty was Richard was mad at his engine department. Mm-hmm. And this is in the height of the King's day.
Legacies, yeah.
So Maurice Petty was his brother, and he was the head engine builder. So Richard didn't like the engines that they had. So Maurice seeked out to different engine manufacturers around the United States that built Cup engines, and they bought random engines from random companies from like 5 different people. Well, my dad's engine ended up going to Michigan and winning the race. And I didn't really think much of it, but like Michigan is like the highest horsepower track that you had to have. I mean, it's
that makes sense.
You have to have power to win there. And like for a guy to build an engine off of Airport Road in Reading and put it in a crate and ship it to Richard Petty's shop and they go win like Michigan, like I didn't understand the significance of that until like later on, and I became a crew chief, and just how difficult Michigan, and it's a 2-mile super speedway, so how difficult that was. And I mean, I always knew my dad was smart and really good on engines. But, like I said, once I became a crew chief myself and our struggles at Michigan were real. And it was like, man, my dad built a motor one time and shipped it out here. And Richard Petty went and won a 500-mile race at Michigan. And that's how
crazy.
he got kind of, pulled back into it at that point in time. But when the Petty Enterprise thing closed, that's when he came home, and we decided we were gonna, when I was 13, and get into the outlaw kart stuff, and he went and did a whole different direction. But he was still piddling around with some engine stuff with